Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our first webinar of 2024 in the Productivity and Profitability webinar series. This series is being brought to you by Meat and Livestock Australia and Agrista, and it is designed to assist sheep, cattle, and goat producers to increase the productivity and profitability of their businesses. In this series, we'll provide you with timely technical information that's relevant to all producers across Australia. My name is Tanisha Shields and I'm a consultant with Agrista and I will be your host for tonight's webinar. In this webinar, we will be hearing from Sally Murfitt of Inspire Ag about the human agronomy of farming. Before I hand over to tonight's speaker, I would like to cover off on a few housekeeping topics. Tonight's webinar is being recorded and you'll be able to access this recording on the MLA or Agrista website. Throughout the webinar this evening, if you have any questions for Sally, please head to slido.com and enter the code J2024. So if you head to slido.com and enter that code, you'll be able to ask your questions. We will then address all of the questions at the end of the webinar. I will now hand over to tonight's speaker, Sally Murfitt. Sally is the Chief Inspiration Officer at Inspire Ag. Inspire Ag is a renowned people and culture consultancy 100% focused on the Australian agriculture sector. The primary focus of Inspire Ag is to assist farmers, both family-owned and corporate, and farming organisations to grow teams where people and businesses thrive together. With a comprehensive range of services specifically tailored to the unique needs of Australian agriculture, Inspire Ag supports clients throughout the entire people life cycle. Their expertise lies in leadership development, team growth, performance management, succession planning, and strategic business planning. At the heart, Sally, who is our presenter tonight, believes that people are the power of agriculture and is dedicated to helping her clients build teams where every individual is seen, valued, and heard. This passion stems from her unwavering commitment to the long-term success of farming businesses and their people. Thank you, Sally. I'll hand over to you.
Lovely. Thank you, Tanisha. Before I kick off, I just wanted to say thank you to yourself and also to Prue at Agrista for the invitation to present the first webinar for 2024 in the MLA Productivity and Profitability series. It's a great honour and privilege. So we're here tonight to talk about the human aspect of running a successful farming business, so the human agronomy. If you've seen me present before, some of the slides that I present tonight may be familiar to you. However, there's been a lot of effort put into refreshing the slides, expanding them, bringing in new data, and also bringing new trends that we can look out for in our farming businesses to ensure that we get off on the right foot for 2024. So humans, in my mind, positively impact both industry and business performance. And I find it really interesting as an industry. We are super keen talking about the production side of the business, such as the kilograms of beef per hectare, the DSEs, the LSUs, the COPs, all the acronyms, the weather, even what the neighbours are up to. But the people stuff, not so much. I find that ironic because in my mind, it really is the people that drive the production in this business. There's a lot of words on this slide, but I just wanted to highlight that there are lots of moving parts to a farming business. Each human is unique, each business is unique, and I encourage you that before you take any action from the information or data that's being presented in tonight's webinar, that you seek specialised advice. So I like to offer people in the audience a bit of a framework to frame our discussion up with, and the one that I want to offer up tonight is the internal and the external environment. So the internal environment, when I'm with a client and I'm talking to them about that, I'm talking about things that we have control over as leaders and managers of a business. So the way that we communicate as a leader, the way that our team communicates with each other, our culture, our conduct, our policies, procedures, things that we have some sort of impact or influence over. Then we have the external environment. So if you're familiar with the pestle model, if you're not, I just want to touch on a couple of these without going through them all. So when I'm asking clients to think about the external environment, I'm getting them to think about and look at what's the current state of the political environment, for example. In the economic sense, what are interest rates doing? How easy is capital to access? From a technology point of view, what sort of science and technology is changing and advancing this industry and really changing the way that we grow food and fibre. Actually, just before I go into that, I just want to say, like, the internal stuff, it's the stuff that we manage, to think about it in another way, and the external environment is the stuff that we mitigate. So internal manage, external mitigate. So I want to start this webinar off tonight by giving you some external environmental factors that are changing and influencing the way that we manage our people and also the way we attract them into our businesses. Now, labour availability has been a long-standing issue in Australian agriculture, and I don't think that's something that's going to change overnight. This particular slide here comes from agricultural appointments, and what they've been doing is over the last 10 years, they've been tracking data in terms of the number of candidates in the market at any given time in comparison to the number of jobs that have been advertised on seek.com.au. And you can see from this slide, January 2013, there was a really close correlation. So 100 candidates for about 100 roles. And as you move along that timeline, it just keeps getting wider and wider, with the exception of March 2020, where it pinched in there quite significantly. And I'm sure I don't need to remind you what happened in about March 2020 for that to happen. As of January 2023, there were 525 jobs available in that month for 100 candidates. 12 months earlier, that was sitting at about 425. So throughout 2023, we started to see some headlines like this, indicating that the demand for workforce or labour had decreased. And it sort of got me thinking, is this actually something that's really playing out, or is there something that's underpinning this? When you look at seek.com.au, as of about half an hour ago, in fact, I looked at seek.com.au and there was 1,123 jobs available under the category of farming, animals and conservation. So not all of those jobs would have been agricultural or agribusiness. Some of them would have been jobs like vet nurses and those sort of roles. But for the most part, the biggest chunk of them would have been related to our industry. When I presented this data back in about mid-October this year, when I presented to the first year agribusiness and the first year farm business management students at Marcus Oldham Ag College, at the start of each workshop, I would point out these figures, and the figures were sitting at about 1,400 to 1,500 jobs under that particular category. So my take on it is that there is still a demand out there for labour. But I think employers are getting frustrated in not being able to find the appropriate supply of skills and labour. My boots on the ground says that there is a demand and the demand is high. It's just that a lot of people can't find the workforce. And in my experience, what a lot of clients are doing is they're actually shelving some of their expansion plans because they can't find the appropriate people to drive that investment. Demographic challenges is something that we need to look at as an industry if we want to ensure that we've got the appropriate supply of skills and labour. It's no secret as an industry we're an increasing average age. We're sitting at about 52 as of the last census, the average age of the Australian farmer. The Australian farm manager is essentially 12 years older than any other profession across the Australian economy. And then when you look at generational dynamics, I think this is an area that we can really strongly look at as an industry. When you look at millennials, for example, they comprise of about 26% of our population, but they're actually over 50% of our workforce pool. So understanding more about the millennial is something that's going to be really important for us. Millennials who are in that age range of about mid-20s through to late 30s, a lot of them are working casually and part-time, Yet as an industry, we're offering full-time roles. So I think the first hint there is that we can start looking at the way that we're offering up our roles and role design if we want to open up the workforce pool. When you look a little bit deeper, you'll understand that the average millennial stays in a role for about 2.5 years. They will have potentially 5 different career changes in that time and 17 different employers. So that old nugget of a job for life is just something that's not ringing true anymore for our industry. So there's not very many, in another way, I guess there's not very many gold watches being handed out for the 50-year mark like there was once upon a time. This particular slide here, and I hope you can see it. It is a little bit small, but I hope you can get the gist of it. This caught my eye when myself and another fellow by the name of Bernard Salt, who's one of Australia's leading demographers, presented on a Dairy Sustainability Framework webinar back in December 2022. And basically, this slide represents the Australian working age population. So Bernard mentioned in this webinar that from 1960 through to 2020, the average number of people that were added to working age population was about 175,000 people, so 15 to 64. Based on birth rate data and projecting out, demographers reckon that from the period through to 2020 to 2050, there's only going to be about 110,000 people added to working population. So in Bernard's mind and a lot of other demographers' minds, the only way that we're going to find the appropriate supply of skills and labour for our industry is to actually get more productivity per labour unit than going to try and find the people that are going to be in short supply. And particularly if you match that up with NFF data that come out about 12 to 18 months ago, where they suggested that we needed 175,000 people a year to fill the vacancies that we had in agriculture, you can see that that's going to be a significant challenge. The next external environmental trend is industrial revolution. So we have experts are saying that we've been through or currently in the fourth industrial revolution. So as we've moved through each revolution, we've gone through mechanisation, mass production, automation, and what they're terming as Industry 4.0. It's characterised largely by the Internet of Things, blockchain, robotics, AI, not the type of AI we're accustomed to in a livestock business, but artificial intelligence. So there's been a fundamental shift in the way that we farm. The way that we lead and manage people, though, hasn't really changed all that much over time. Our approach to leadership and management is rather traditional, very authoritative, or carrot and stick, or if I can say it in another way that I'm sure we'll all understand and probably heard a few times directed at us. If you don't like it, mate, there's the gate. But what I'm advocating for is that we need to change the way that we approach leadership and management. We need to take a modern approach and be much more people focused and relationship based. Modern leadership has a greater emphasis on the relationship aspect rather than transactional. This Gallup data here speaks volumes, I think, and it really highlights some of the things that we're going to talk about later in the presentation. But essentially, it speaks to the Great Resignation, which is a phenomenon that's playing out in the US at the moment. So what happened is in the US workforce, they went through the pandemic, they started reassessing what was important to them in life, and they were taking pay cuts, demotions, and even quitting altogether, all in order to get some sort of balance back into their lives. So you might think, well, what does this phenomenon playing out in the US, how does that have any relevance to Australian agriculture? Well, I think I always look at the US and particularly New Zealand because I think they're ahead of the game when it comes to trends. I think this trend could actually be a benefit for Australian agriculture. And the reason that makes me think that is at the 2022 National Farmers Federation Conference, a presenter from the University of Canberra presented some data, and she said that for the first time in the last census, since records have been kept, city population had actually decreased and regional population had actually increased. So Where I think this is an opportunity, I think this is an opportunity for the industry to gain some valuable transferable skill sets that have been established and evolved in other industries, bring that into our sector. And while these candidates might not necessarily have the industry experience they're after, they've got a valuable range of skill sets that can really drive our industry forward. So now I want to change it up a gear. Let's shift gears a little bit. I want to talk to you about some strategies that can help you nurture your human agronomy. And I've broadly themed these into 5 different categories. The first one I'll talk about is clarity. The next will be connection, communication, culture, and conduct. So clarity. I think this is, there's a saying out there that says that if you do not give your team great goals to work to, you're asking for average performance. So clarity is does your team understand the values and expectations of what's required to operate successfully in your business? Have you shared with them what the vision is and communicated that for 2024 and beyond? Have you shown your team how they can contribute to that vision? And are they clear on the nuts and bolts of it? Are they clear on the how they can actually contribute? There's another saying that people join a business for the vision and often they get oversold on the vision, but they often leave for leadership. And I know it sounds pretty rough, but that's just how it is. This Harvard research, or this quote for some Harvard research, really caught my eye a few months ago when I found it. It said basically that purpose-driven businesses, so businesses that are future focused, the businesses that have clarity around their business expectations and how the team can contribute to it, those sort of businesses make more money. They've got better engaged employees. They're better at the innovation, and they're also better at transformational change. What employees are looking for is not what we think. They're not chasing a paycheck in this modern era. What they're chasing is a leader that will communicate with them, a business that they can be involved with where they will be valued. They're chasing the vision, the autonomy, the flexibility, progression, and training opportunities, and also recognition and reward for a job well done. The next one is connection. I don't think that, and by connection, what I'm saying here is how do we find the appropriate supply of skills and labor? I don't think there's anything more important than we can do in this business than hiring the right people, wrapping the right systems and support around them, and essentially getting out of their road. And I think that starts with recruitment. It's a damn expensive exercise. The HR experts out there will tell you that the average recruitment process costs around $18,000 to $24,000 and can take about 80 days. So imagine if you had to start this process over and over and over again at the end of every probation period, you could see that it's going to have a pretty quickly have a significant impact on the bottom line, particularly if you're getting the wrong fit. Attracting candidate interest, I think as an industry, we tend to only think about of that's not showing up there, is it, Tanisha? The circles. Oh, it is? Okay, it's just dropped off on my slide for some reason. Hopefully you can cut that bit out. As an industry, we tend to only think about promotion of our sector or our business when there's a resignation or a retirement in our business. So we're operating up there in that top circle. But my advocacy here tonight is that we need to start thinking about, particularly as the market tightens, about becoming an employer of choice. And when you're operating in that space, you need to have a clear understanding about what your employee value proposition is. So essentially, what is your promise to your current and your future workforce about what they're going to get from you in exchange for their skills, their capability, and their experience above their wage? That's an EVP. I want to show you 2 examples now. I'm going to test the internet gods here in these next 2 slides, but hopefully this works out. Somebody touch some wood, please, if you can. But I want to show you 2 examples of promotion. And for those of you who've left your glasses in another room, I'm going to read this out. Situation vacant, stockman required, 20 hours a week to feed bulls, must be non-smoker, wear his hat with his peak to the front, be capable of wearing his pants around his backside, not his knees, also needs to be able to divorce himself from his phone for more than 2 hours at a time. This may turn into a permanent job. I quite like the one below it that labourer for 800 cubic metres of concrete can be a smoker but won't have time. But I digress. So I want to show you, by contrast, this video that I come across in February 2023 of a young couple in the Riverina. They posted this video on Twitter looking for somebody to join their team. And here's where I'm going to test the internet gods and let's see if it'll play. I'm not going to play the full extent of the video. If you're interested in the full one, please let me know and I'm happy to send it to you. But we'll just have a look at the first, say, minute of it.
Welcome to Fairview, 20 minutes south of West Wyong in the Riverina of New South Wales.
We are an emerging family-run cropping enterprise looking to begin a rapid process of expansion over the course of the next 10 years. We are currently looking for a farmhand to grow with us on this venture.
We predominantly grow dryland winter cereal and break crops on about 1350 hectares at our property, where we have been busily improving our farm practices and developing systems to set ourselves up for the future. We also run an active rural contracting business across the Riverina.
As business owners, we are forward thinkers and love to challenge the status quo. We are often found trying new technology, new methods, and exploring new directions as it inspires us to grow as producers and as people.
We share values of integrity and initiative and apply a practical and particular mindset to everything we do. And we'd be looking for someone who shares those values to join us as we grow.
As a family-run farm, we promise a friendly and supportive environment where you are made to feel part of the family. Farming, to us, is a way of life, and we intend to include a full-time worker into as many aspects of that life.
The distinctive feature about this position is that we are eager and willing to mould the role around the successful candidate's personal interests. For instance, if you have an interest in and desire to learn about trucks, then we are willing to make that a focal point of the job and support you in building your knowledge and skill level in that area. If you have more of a desire to learn agronomy, then we will tailor the work to suit those interests as well.
Ultimately, if you are willing to learn, listen, and communicate effectively with us, you will enjoy the challenge and be welcomed with open arms into our business.
Check out our job ad and reach out to us if it sounds like you.
So by contrast, implementing a video like that as a digital strategy builds your profile as an employer of choice, in my mind. It helps you build interest in the role. You get a feel for the business. You understand the quality of the assets and the landscape that you'll be operating in. And so as a result of implementing a video into your recruitment campaign, you're going to get better quality candidates. Looking at the previous example, I mean, you look at the optics of that. Was that particular ad a little bit tongue-in-cheek? Is there a diversity and inclusion problem there? Who knows? But I guess at the end of the day, I've shown you these chalk and cheese examples because the old days of putting an ad in the newspaper, in the local rural newspaper in your state, and with a big headline that says, "Help wanted, must work hard and thrive on neglect," really are days gone by. We have to do better as an industry. Next one I want to talk about is communication. When I ask clients what's their key challenge before, usually in an initial consultation with them, usually 9 times out of 10, it comes back to communication or problems that have evolved in the business as a result of communication. And I think this is really interesting because the way that we naturally think, act, and communicate is said to have anywhere between a 20 and a 200% financial impact on our business. So this is actually something that's really important for us to focus on. Just leave this here for a moment. That is how the fight started. I can assure you, having been in some of these situations, that fights have happened and started for sillier reasons than blue versus green. But I want to tell you about a Virginia Tech study so Virginia Tech did a study specifically on family farmers, And what they found was that family farmers that had regular business meetings, they communicated well, and they gave everybody a voice. So I'm not saying that everybody got a decision, was involved in that decision-making process, but they got to have a voice about the decision that was being made. Those sort of businesses were 21% more profitable than those businesses that decided not to operate in that way. So in my mind, I think that's pretty good fodder. Getting a 20% improvement in your business by just improving your communication and having a meeting of a Monday morning, I think that's a pretty good investment in time. One of the best places that you can start if you want to improve your communication is with yourself, because how you show up matters. And I don't think anyone says it better than Francis. And if anyone can have a crack at Francis's surname, please let me know how to pronounce this, because I'm a little bit stuck. But Francis says, first we must understand ourselves before we can help or lead others. And I just think that is just bang on. As I said, how you show up matters. It has an impact on other people. And this understanding yourself, I think, is probably some of the hardest and most confronting work that you'll ever do. But it's also probably some of the most valuable work that you will ever do. And that's coming from somebody that's done some of the hard miles there. And here's the evidence for that. This Gallup research says that a manager is responsible for 70% variance in team engagement, and that can either be positive or negative. So how a leader treats a team determines how the team treats each other, and is really, really strongly linked to an increase in retention, a decrease in turnover, a decrease in safety incidences, and improvement in profitability. As a consultant, I lean really heavily on tools like the DISC model to help clients build some understanding about themselves and others, and also to help build emotional intelligence for themselves and others. So the DISC model says that there are 4 profiles, and you can be a combination of these, but the 4 basic profiles are: you're a dominance, so you're very direct, you're driven, and you're decisive. So you might be an influence. So you're enthusiastic, influential, and sociable. Steadiness, supportive, tolerant, and consistent. Or compliance, diligent, conscientious, and logical. So I've been taught a couple of different strategies to think about where somebody might naturally sit if you've got a challenge in that space in the way that you're communicating. So listen to the types of questions that people ask. Dominance, they're going to ask the what questions. The influencers are going to ask who's going to turn up to work today that I can play with. The steadiness, they're going to ask the why questions. Why are we doing it this way? Or is there a better way to do it? And your compliance, they're going to ask how questions. The other way that I've been taught to think about this is think about it like a radar if you're having trouble pinning down where somebody might be. So thinking about the energy, is the person reserved or are they outgoing? So are they above or below the line? Are they task orientated or are they a people orientated person? So are they left or right? And that will usually give you a really quick understanding of where somebody might sit. I'm not advocating that one is better than the other. Please don't get me wrong in that. What I'm advocating for is that the moment that we can appreciate our differences, the moment we start to build relationships, this is going to lead us to a team that trusts and respects each other. And as a result of that, your team is going to perform well together. Culture. This is one of my favorite topics. Actually, all of these topics are my favorite topics. It's like choosing between children. But culture is something that's really really quite important. I think it's probably one of the most undervalued business performance tools there is. I describe culture as like the baling twine that keeps everything together. It's what you believe, it's how you behave, and it's how you decide as a team. Culture can either encourage your team to perform at its best or give it excuses to fall short of the mark. When I first saw this data here, it was like a big smack between the eyes that employees are 10.4 times more likely to quit a bad culture than to leave your team for money reasons. I think I knew it was high, but I just did not realize that it was quite that high. There was it kind of reminds me of a story where a UK animal behaviouralist and welfare scientist, Dr. Krista McLennan, she looked at a study where they separated cattle they did this control where they separated cattle and then they put them with their preferred mates. So cattle that were kept not with their preferred mate, there was a huge decline in their welfare and as also their productivity. When they were with their preferred mates, there was lower stress levels, there were lower heart rates than if they were put with a random cow. And what she saw was significant behavioural, psychological, and milk production changes as a result of whether they were with their mate or not with their mate. And this is, to me, in my mind, like workplace culture. You've got to create an environment that's psychological and physically safe. And the type of environment where your relationships are repairable. Your people, if you create this sort of environment, your people will reward you with performance that leads to improved profitability. And if you want to make a mess of it, here's how to go about it. A bit tongue-in-cheek, but hire a star performer, ignore their toxic behavior, ignore the impact they have on other people, and you wonder why people disengage or resign from your business. Changing culture isn't like changing a blown fuse. Culture of any organization or business is shaped by the worst behavior that the leader is willing to tolerate. I follow a US human performance specialist, and she says that if you've got drama in your business, which I'll touch on more in a moment, but if you've got drama in your business, it's happened for one of three reasons. You either hired it, you allowed it, or you're it. Brutal, I know, but it's true. And as I said, I'll touch on more on that in conduct about drama in a moment. When you're bringing new people into your team, I want you to think about this. You are not just hiring a labour unit, you are hiring the whole person. With that comes personality, behaviour styles, character, and this essentially becomes your culture. So choose wisely. Actually, this is my favourite topic, employee engagement. If you've got an engaged employee in your business, these are the sort of people that care about you and they care about your business and they will do whatever it takes to help you achieve your business objectives. By contrast, if you've got a disengaged employee, these are the sort of people that will just do enough to stay off the boss's radar in exchange for a paycheck at the end of the week. And the difference between the two is this discretionary effort. So thinking about supporting individuals, this is the important part. Find individuals that don't just want to work for the paycheck or the next promotion. Find people that want to work to help you achieve that vision and the objectives. And if you find these people, they will increase the performance of your business by tenfold. If you have to replace a disengaged employee and bring a new person in and build them up to an engaged employee, this can cost you anywhere between 30 and 200% of the annual wage of that role. Pretty significant, I would suggest. I would say generational understanding, or probably should say generational misunderstanding, is one of the top 1 to 2 reasons that I get called in to support farming or agribusinesses here in Australia. So I work nationally with clients, and it's not uncommon in this day and age for 5 generations to be working together at any one time. I got really tired of the older generation saying that the younger generation were just lazy and self-centered and entitled. And I got tired of the younger generation saying the older generation were dinosaurs, they were stuck in their way and they were too controlling. I appreciate that this particular slide is quite busy. If you are interested in this generational research, I encourage you to go and look at McCrindle research. Search it up in Google under generational understanding, and you will find a secondary slide of this. And you'll also find some explanatory notes that will give you more insight into the experiences and the leadership styles and how people like to be led of each particular generation and how they like to learn. And if you want to see this in action, go ahead and Google MLA's 2024 Australia Day ad. My goodness, it is brilliant. Just for the entertainment value, it's a great watch. I guess my main message here, though, is that, we should be not gossiping about each other. We should be understanding the richness of experience that each generation brings, the diversity of perspective also. And when we do that, what we actually get is we get improved productivity, we get better workforce participation, and overall, we get better business outcomes. When I start working with clients, a lot of them tell me that they're just absolutely mentally and emotionally exhausted from dealing with performance and conduct issues, or in some cases, not dealing with it. That's what's keeping them up at night. Not dealing with performance and conduct issues because somebody is the best employee, they might be a family member, they might be the most knowledgeable person that you've got in your business. They are not good enough reasons not to actively manage performance and conduct issues. They're not good enough reasons to tolerate it. I spoke a little bit before about drama. You're either hired it, you're allowed it, or you're it. Well, research actually tells us that the average employee spends about 2.5 hours a day in drama. This can be things like second guessing what the instructions were, resentment, confusion, conflict, miscommunication, etc. And I think it's really hard to actually to quantify that. But even if you go to the award, get the lowest pay rate in the award, multiply it by 5 days a week and say, I don't know, 48 weeks a year, it'll come out to close to $13,000 per employee per year. That's what it's costing your business by not dealing with it. I've got a couple of models now that can help you with this. So some of you might have seen the above and below the line. So I think about it as or bed. So if you're leading from above the line, in the simplest explanation, you're open and you're curious and you're committed to learning from situation. If you are operating below the line as a leader, you're closed off, you're defensive, and the only thing that you're committed to is being right. I think the challenge here is that the first whiff of conflict in our business, our silly lizard brain kicks in, fear rises up, we get really defensive, we double down on being right. And at this point, we are firmly below the line. So above and below the line, one of the most helpful models that I can offer up tonight. The next model is SCARF. And while I won't read it all, SCARF is something that I would usually put in front of my clients if they've got a challenging situation, because when things go pear-shaped, it's usually for one and sometimes more of these reasons. This model will help you operate a results-driven business, help your people be more accountable to yourself and to the business, be more committed, and it will also help build trust if you understand that. If you don't manage it, it will corrode the performance of any team, and therefore it's going to have a financial impact on the business. In a modern employment relationship, there are essentially 3 contracts. Whether they're written or not, there are 3 contracts in a modern employment relationship. So when you're thinking about the employment contract, it's the legal obligations, which are aligned to the national employment standards and also the modern award, etc. So this is the rules of operation, or the legal rules of operation. We've got a social contract. These are the ground rules, the policies, the procedures, the codes of conduct, the way that you agree to work with each other. And then there's a psychological contract, and that is trust that we'll be treated fairly. One of the big components of a psychological contract is psychological safety. Now, if I'm involved in your team and I've got psychological safety, I have the safety to pop my hand up and say, I made a mistake. I need some help here. I don't agree with what you just said. I don't understand. And this is not just this psychological safety is just something this psychological safety is not something that is just soft and fluffy anymore. It's actually embedded in legislation. So as of the 1st of April last year, there is legislation in place to say that psychological hazards is a reason that you can get in trouble as an employer. Psychological hazards can be things like too much workload, too high a schedule, toxic cultures, relationships that are toxic as well. So as I begin to wrap up this session tonight, I want to, the human agronomy is, I just want to highlight to you that human agronomy is one of the key components of succession. It's one of the key components of employee engagement, and it's also one of the components of managing successful relationships in your business. There's a saying that says teams do not outperform their leaders, they reflect them. So teams do not outperform their leaders, they reflect them. My key message here tonight is people are the mess and the magic of running a successful farming business. They drive the production. Understand yourself, understand the environment, respect each other's differences, spend time hiring the right people and get out of their road, and value the whole person and not just the part that makes you money as an employer. Without a team of people who trust, respect, and support each other, you just happen to have a group of individuals who happen to be working for the same business. I hope this presentation, ladies and gentlemen, has inspired you this evening to be a people-focused leader that creates cultures that are safe, productive, and profitable, and also relationships that are repairable. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions, but for the moment, I'll hand over to Tanisha.
Thank you, Sally. That was really, really valuable. And I hope that the attendees tonight have gained some valuable insight like I have from your presentation. We've actually had quite a few questions come through. So I'll just remind those in the audience, if you have any questions, you need to head to slido.com and enter the code J2024. But we'll jump off with the first question, Sally. And it was about something you mentioned at the start of the presentation. Do you think not having a job for life is a problem for our industry?
I like longevity as an employer as an employer myself and as a leader in the industry. I love to know that I've got the continuity of skills, labor and experience within my business. But I also acknowledge that, this is not the modern world that we live in. People want variety, they want autonomy, and they want flexibility. And the only way that we can give that is to help them get to the next stage. And I know as a farming business, it can often be really hard to offer career progression, for example, within your business, particularly if your role is the next role that somebody can progress to within the business. But I don't think it is a problem. I think the way that we think about it needs to change as a sector.
That leads really well into the next question that we had, Sally, and it's how do I choose someone if they have little to no industry experience? So, for example, you were talking about skill transfer.
Yeah. Yep. I operate off the philosophy, and I encourage my clients to operate off this philosophy as well, that train for skill, hire for attitude, because you will spend more time managing performance and conduct than you will training skills. So I don't know what else I can add to that. I think it's something that we need to focus on as a sector for sure.
Do you have any clients or any little hints that you might help listeners to hire for attitude or identify that?
Yeah, so what I've seen in the industry in the last couple of years, probably the last 5 years, is a decline in not doing reference checks on people. I think they can be a really significant tool in finding out whether somebody has the right attitude or not. I think also trying to find the right person and trying to find the right attitude, it can come from the way that you design your recruitment process as well, in terms of the questions that you might ask in an interview process. So rather than asking skill-based questions, asking behavior-based questions. For example, one example might be, tell me about a time when you messed up and what you did to do it to rectify that particular situation. Not necessarily in the words that they might say to you, but what you're trying to ascertain there is, can this person actually be reflective, acknowledge that they made a mistake, and show the thought process of how they got around that. That's how you hire for attitude, I think.
Really good tip, Sally, and probably something that we're not often strong with in the agriculture sector. We're always focused on the doing rather than the how.
Yeah.
Another question that's come through is, how do I get my employer to understand the importance of DISC?
When the student is ready, the teacher will arrive. This is not something that you can jam down somebody's throat. They have to be prepared to sit down in the discomfort, and the gratitude of tools like this, and be willing to work through that process. You can't, just in the same way as you can't force a family member to succeed in the business, as in succession. You can't force them to be ready for it. The person has to be ready for the lessons to take hold, I think.
And there was another question about DISC. How do you make sure that DISC doesn't become polarizing? So people picking letters and just sticking to, well, that's the way I am.
Yeah, that's a really good question. As I said through this presentation, like, I'm not advocating that one is better than the other. I had a lady come up to me when I presented in Victoria a couple of years ago, and she said, "How do I get myself a team of Ds?" And I'm like, hell no, you do not want that. Similar to the generational differences, the diversity of perspective, diversity in thinking, the diversity in the way that you act is a really important part of a healthy business. Knowing how, understanding the differences, that's where tools like DISC, or there are a number of other tools out there. I'm not advocating that DISC is the only option, but it is one option that can help you understand how you naturally think, act, and communicate, and how you can potentially get better outcomes by understanding how other people naturally think, act, and communicate, and adjust your message or your delivery in that way.
Excellent. Thanks, Sally. And the next question, we have quite a few, is how do I know what the culture is like in my business?
There's I heard Mick, I'm sorry, his name has just escaped me, who was on one of the previous webinars. Heard him say something that I parrot quite a lot in the industry, and that is that a culture is how your employees feel about coming to work on a Monday morning, on a Sunday evening. So if you're sitting at home and you're dreading that you've got to get up the next morning and go to work and deal with whatever's put in front of you, I'd suggest that the culture isn't that great. And the other thing that I would add to culture is that culture belongs to your people. A lot of people think that culture belongs to the leader, but it doesn't. It's what your people say about you and your leadership style and your business, when you're not there to defend yourself.
Very, very true. And if anyone's interested, you can watch that very first webinar that we ran back in July with Mick. It will be on the MLA and Agrista websites as well. The next question, Sally, is how do I get engaged employees in the current market when there's so few prospective employees and so many jobs available?
Ooh, um, that is a really good question. I think that comes back to becoming an employer of choice. So if you're an employer of choice, essentially people will come to you, as opposed to you going out to the market saying you need somebody. So if you already have people coming to you saying, do you have a job opportunity available in your business at the moment? I'm interested in becoming a part of your team. I would suggest that you have the beginnings of a great employer of choice mentality. Um, yeah, I think it's also about how we go about trying to find the right people in our business. That is a really important part, as I alluded to, that it can be a really costly exercise. So spending more time in the recruitment process, understanding people's motivations, why they applied for the job, why they want to come and work for you, what gets them out of bed every morning, designing that in your recruitment process by the way that the types of questions that you're asking is really important if you want to find employees that are engaged. And again, going back to the reference checking, making sure that you're validating somebody's claims that they've actually worked for somebody else or a particular person, and understanding how they operated in that environment, whether they were the type of employees that could be held accountable, whether they've got that, I call it a reflective switch. So they have the ability to go, okay, I did something wrong here. Here's how I'm going to go about rectifying that. I'd say there's a couple of my tips without going into too much depth.
Thank you, Sally. It's definitely a very tricky question to answer. There's another one that's just come through. How can I apply these principles in my family farming business? I'm not necessarily employing people.
Yeah. Look, the skill, the trends, the information, the data that I've presented applies whether you are a part of a family farming business with paid or unpaid labour, or a combination of both. Again, similar to the succession response that I gave, people have to be ready to sit at that table, and they have to be ready to participate. And I guess you've got to ask yourself the question: if your people, in whatever form that takes, are not prepared to sit down and have those sort of conversations, do you actually need to be there? Is there somebody else that's prepared to pay you more and value you more and appreciate you more by going to work for somebody else?
Definitely a tricky space, family farming, Sally. And this probably links into, we've got one more question that's come through. So if anyone in the audience has any final questions, type them in the Slido now. But the last question that we've got is, how do I know if I'm an employer of choice, and how do I create that employee value proposition?
So if you're interested, I've got some tools that I can send to people. Feel free to I'll just go back a slide there. There's my contact details. If this is something that interests you, I do have some tools and resources that I'm able to forward you that I've found online for free, and I'm happy to send them your way if this is something that you're interested in. But I guess, in the most simplest way, thinking about, why do people come and work for you? Even going back and asking some of your previous employees why they left you in the first place. Did they leave for career opportunities or career progression? Did they leave because you're a jerk? Some of that information can actually help you craft your employee value proposition. And again, happy to share if it's of value to you.
Thank you very much, Sally. I know I've certainly gotten a lot out of tonight's webinar, and with the amount of questions we have had, I think the audience has as well. So thank you so much for your time, and thank you everyone for attending tonight's webinar. As we move to the end of the webinar this evening, I'd really appreciate it if everyone jumps on the QR code that's on the screen there and provides us with some feedback. This feedback's really important to us because it helps us to pick future topics and also to make sure that we're meeting your needs and expectations with our presenters on this series. If you have any additional questions, please also complete the survey and you can add them through, and I'll make sure that we link you to Sally and any of the resources that Sally's mentioned this evening. There's also a link in the Slido. So if the QR code's not working for you, you can jump back onto the Slido and click the link there to be able to provide your feedback. We thank you again for attending this webinar, and we look forward to you joining us again in a month's time for our next webinar, which will be on Valentine's Day on the 14th of February, where we'll be hearing from Cam Nicholson about the so what of carbon in agriculture. If you missed last month's webinar, be sure to jump over to the MLA or Agrista website to watch it. And if you can't get enough of this, please make sure you jump over and check out our podcast series. You can find it on all major podcast platforms. And what we do on the podcast is take a bit more of a deep dive into these topics with our presenters and answer a few more audience questions that come through. Once again, Sally, thank you very much, and thank you everyone for joining us on the 10th of January. It's been a great start to 2024, and I look forward to the rest of the year.